All right, we're going to get started. So welcome everyone to the final lecture in our virtual lecture series this winter. Thanks to everyone who's joined us along the way. It's been a great 6 weeks. And as one of our participants today said, happy International Women's Day to everyone. It's March 8th. And we've got a lovely woman here with us today, Linda Fritz. We're going to be recording today's lecture, as you probably just heard. So we'll be uploading it to our YouTube channel. For any reason you get kicked out or you can't watch today, I'll be sending that out to everyone who registered and also posting it on our social media and in our e-blasts. You can also use the Q&A functions and the chat box today to send us any questions or comments, and I'll field those to Linda at the appropriate time. And if you want to support any of our virtual lecture series like this or any other free programming that we do here at the museum, as well as our exhibitions and our collection, I will be putting a link in the chat box for our Canada Helps page. So thank you to anyone who has donated over the series for that. We really appreciate it. So today, as I mentioned, we have Linda Fritz, who's a member of the museum and often presents as part of our famous and infamous discussion program. So some of you may have seen some of her presentations. Linda was a University of Saskatchewan librarian for more than 30 years and moved to Queenston to escape the winter. While here, she's learned and talked about the history of the community and indulged in all that it has to offer. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Linda, so you can tell us about some of the historic homes in Queenston.
Thank you, Amy. It's great to be here. And I must say that part of this is I moved from a city to a small village, and I just wondered how I was going to be received. It was wonderful. People are fantastic here. So I'm going to take you for a walk through Queenston. I'm not going to talk about every place in the village of Queenston, but I will invite you to come for a walk when it gets warmer, and we can go through and we can see the things that we're talking about today and some of the things that we don't talk about today. Okay, so my sources. On June the 18th, 1988, a number of the villagers who had lived here forever went for a walk through the village and talked about a lot of the places in Queenston. I managed to get a hold of a recording of this. It was and transcribed it. It was a bit of fun because a lot of the people that were there in 1988 were still alive when I was doing this. So I was able to follow up when I had questions. So that was really good. The Niagara-on-the-Lake Historical Museum, the Joy Ormsby Fond, was really useful for me to find some of these houses and some of the stories about them. And there's lots of local people who still tell stories about this village. It's a wonderful place. I'd like to shout out to Kathy Thomas, who worked with me to gather some of the pictures in the past. So here we are. Okay, where is Queenston? Village of Queenston. On the north border, we have Line 6, so some distance from what people think of as a village. The eastern border is pretty clear. It's the Niagara River. Sometimes we think about expanding into Lewiston, but we won't. The western border is where Concession 1, if it existed, would come through to York Road. I think now there's just something called an unassumed road, and it's basically a trail down the hill. So that would be the western border. And the southern border, nobody's ever told me. So whether it includes Queenston Heights or not, I don't know. When I'm talking about burial grounds in Queenston, I do talk about Queenston Heights. Now, what's the name of this village? How did it come about? It was originally Queenstown, and I've been on trips in Europe where people say, oh, you're a New Zealander, you're from Queenstown. No, I'm from Queenston in Canada, so that's a challenge. The first recorded name of Queenstown was in November the 26th, 1792, when Robert Hamilton referred to the village in a letter as Queenston. Population of the village, approximately 400. It's been that way forever. In 1911, it became something called a police village. Now, this was something that I think was originally invented by Catherine the Great in Russia. It's a village that's too small to have its own council and its own mayor. So it's not a formal village structure, but there are trustees that could get things done. Okay, this is what Queenston looked like in 1812. This is fun for me because I live in an old house and I'm always looking to see if it's there. It's never there, and so we'll move on. The places that we're going to talk about are places that are in no particular order. I'm going to talk about first the 4 places that most people come to see in the village, and then we'll move on from there. Okay, the Mackenzie Printery, then. 2 important dates in our village that most people associated with it. One is the War of 1812. The second is the Rebellion of 1837. That's when the Mackenzie Printery actually got going. It was William Lyon Mackenzie was one of the leaders of the uprising against the Family Compact. He was a former mayor of Toronto. He moved here and founded something called the Colonial Advocate, a newspaper. Being him, he was in constant financial trouble, and it was published erratically over 10 years. The original printery burnt down, but it was rebuilt during the Depression, and this is what we see today. The new building, the one that's there now, was opened by William Lyon Mackenzie's grandson, William Lyon Mackenzie King. Okay, so that's Willowbank. So that's the printery. Then we get to Willowbank. This is another place that people come to see. It's one of the 2 stately homes that exist in Queenston. This is referred to as the Gothic style or Greek Revival style. It was built in 1834 by Alexander Hamilton, who was the son of Robert Hamilton, the guy that named the place. There have been no musicals written about Alexander Hamilton, our Alexander Hamilton. So if you go to see it, it's fun, but it's not ours. The building's importance was indicated by the cost of the first insurance policy bought for it. In 1835, they put an insurance policy of £500 on it. That was an enormous sum in those days. It has been owned by, it's had a few owners since the Hamilton family. Our colleague Betsy Masson talked about one of the Hamilton descendants who went from riches to rags, is the way she put it, in 1 generation. So she lived at that Hannah Jarvis lived in this place until she died and took in laundry, things like that. So this is Willowbank at its worst. It was bought in 1932 by John Bright, who was the producer of Bright's Wineries. He later built Greystone, which is our other stately home in the village. Bright hired the architect named A.E. Nicholson to modify and modernize the house. And this is the latest version of the house, or it was in the winter when the kids were having a good time. Nicholson was also responsible for the Laura Secord School in the village. And if you look, there's a times in the winter when you can look at the school, from the school toward Willowbank. You can see the pillars and the similarities between the 2 buildings. Okay, next we have the Laura Secord House. This was occupied by descendants of the Secord family until the mid-20th century. They left around 1971, but in 1969, the house had been taken over, the property had been taken over by the Laura Secord Candy Company. As you can see, at the time, the house was 2 stories high. It was restored to the period of 1812. So this is what it looks like now. It was officially opened to the public in 1972. It's a lovely reception area. There's a lot of grounds around it, so it's kind of a fun place to visit. We'll talk a little bit later about one of the churches that's actually on the property because it's one of Queenston's moving churches. Our next place that people often come to see because it's there is Riverbrink. Riverbrink was built by Sam Weir. He built it as his country home toward the end of his life. He spent part of his retirement here, but he traveled a lot. So he spent time in the Cayman Islands and Costa Rica and places like that. Sam is actually buried on the Riverbrink ground, but I thought it was more fun to have a picture of him at his home rather than showing a picture of his grave. And if you don't know Riverbrink, that's what it looks like today. It was built in the 1960s. well, from the 1960s. In fact, the land was actually bought in the 1940s. Took a while to get the place going. The coach house on this side was the first part that was built. It's got a flat above the garages in the bottom. The flat was intended for Sam Weir's sister. Unfortunately, she died before she could move in. So Sam lived here for a lot of the time when the rest of the house was being built. As you know, it's now an art museum, well worth a visit. Lots of interesting stuff goes on here. The architect of this house had the unfortunate name of Arthur Nutter. He was a good friend of Sam's for many, many years and helped to build the place. Okay, now some of the other houses in the village that people don't normally come to see. It's just they're there, they're worth looking at. Okay, the Brown Basil House. This is what it looked like about 20 years ago. It's a clapboard house built in the as a tavern. Okay, so this is what it looks like now. And if you look at this, this is a Georgian house. It was built around 1820, but instead of the typical Georgian style where you've got, where am I? Where's my mouse? Just see if I can find it here. There, okay. It's got the door at one end rather than in the middle in the Palladian style. Okay, what this means is that on this house on this side of the house is a very large room. That was the pub, that was the bar. Now, at the time that the house was built, there were regulations. And among the regulations were that if you were running a pub, you had to have enough room for 4 people to sleep. That's not 4 bedrooms, it's room for 4 people. So the room above is as big as the one below. And you can see from the chimney that all of the heating came up this side. So the back of the house, it's a salt box, so it comes down at an angle at the back, is where the family lived and took care of the needs. They did the cooking, they did everything else there. The other thing about a tavern in the early days was there had to be stabling for 6 horses, and the stabling block has been discovered on this to one side where the garage is now. The stables aren't there, it's long gone, and it's a family home now, but it's the Brown Basil House. The first name in these houses, the first name is the person who actually built the house. The second name indicates the person who restored the place and actually had it designated. This is a designated property. The Lowry Merritt House. I've only got one picture of this. I couldn't find any of the older houses. This was apparently, the sign on the barn suggests that it was built around 1795. There's no confirmation of that. There was a stone house and barn on the property during the War of 1812. It was originally owned by the Lowry family, a big family that, a big name in this village and in St. David's, so well known. It later was bought by the Merritt family, and I'm not sure this was designated, but it's still a beautiful old stone house. It's been under renovation for many years now. The family that owns it are musicians from Toronto. They're trying to set up a space in what was the barn as a musical studio. They also, when they started this, those of you that know the village see the piece in between. At one point, one member of the family needed an elevator to get around, so they put the elevator in. And then you've got the old house at the front. The house was once the power plant, which provided electricity to Queenston before the Sir Adam Beck No. 1 was built. So it had an important role in our village. The barn in the back was apparently the storage place for the Hamilton family. And in 1975, it was an antique shop. So it's, as I said, it's undergoing renovations. All sorts of work has been done. They're doing things like looking for ground source heating, and it's just interesting to watch. Okay. This is called the Little Stone Cottage. It has the date of 1810 on the side, but again, we don't know that much about it. But I want you to take a look at the front of this building. It's now a family home, but at one stage it was a garage, and you can see where the entrance to the garage would have been. This would have been door to allow vehicles in. You can also see here that at one stage there was a window that matched the window on this side. It has been a bed and breakfast, but as I say, now it's a private family home. The D. Cormos House. This is on the corner of D Road and Queenston Street. It's one of the earliest surviving houses in the village. It is designated, the plaque on it says it was built in 1809. Long association with the Hamilton family. Willowbank is just up the hill on the other side of D Road. It was owned by descendants of the Robert Hamilton family for almost 150 years. Lady Simcoe talks about the house in her diary. So it was the last of the Hamiltons sold the house in 1953. It was purchased by Jonathan Cormos and Elizabeth Cormos in 1960, and they lived in it and still own it. They've lived in it since that time. But again, take a look at the front of this house. This is important. We know it's the right house because of where the chimneys are, but this is what, it came out fuzzy. Sorry. Anyway, this is what it looks like today. And what has happened is, look at the window. I take Willowbank students on a tour of the village every September. And one of the students pointed out to me that this window is off center. From what I understand, there was a lot of interior work done in the house, and the staircase was moved so that it came to the front of the house. And this window actually lights the staircase. During the renovations that took place, they found all sorts of interesting artifacts, including things like spoons with the initials RH on it. It was heated by 4 fireplaces, one in downstairs and upstairs, downstairs and upstairs. And the kitchen was on this side, living room, dining room, and the bedrooms. So it is now, of course, heated by gas. What they did was the flues in the chimneys heated the rest of the house. Anyway, again, it's an interesting house. It's a brick house. This is unusual in this village at this period. Okay, moving on. We get to the Secord Copeland House. This house is on the corner of Highlander and Queenston Street. It was built by a Secord, again, an important name in the village. It was purchased by the Copeland family some time ago. They no longer are here, but they renovated the house. It doesn't look like this anymore. It clearly needed renovation. It too lived a certain amount of its life as a tavern, and it too is a designated property. It was a wagon maker's shop, and now it's a private residence. Looks like this today. So still a lovely, lovely old home, but quite different from its origins. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. People often talk about changes that happen to houses and villages. It has to happen. People have to live in these houses. Yes, it was lovely when you had the 2 chimneys and the fireplaces, but it wasn't very convenient for the people that were living in them. You need the modern things to make life work. It's lovely that the houses are still standing, but if they're going to continue to stand, they must be family homes. So that's my rant for the day. Our next house. This has got to be the most photographed and painted house in the village. Queenston. It was owned by descendants of Ransom Goring, who was a magistrate in the area. It looks as though it's falling down. Nobody lives here now. It's owned by 3 sisters, 2 of whom live in the States, and unfortunately they haven't been able to be here since the pandemic started. When I talked to the sisters way back, they said that they spent 6 months a year here with their grandparents and 6 months in the States. They still visit occasionally when they can, but they are getting a little bit older. Anyway, it's a lovely old property. Unfortunately, it has been broken into, and that issue has been dealt with, but there have been issues with it. But people take pictures of it, people come and paint pictures of it, and you can see it. If you go to Riverbrink, there's often a painting of this house there. Okay, we're getting toward the end here because I just chose a few of the houses that needed to be talked about, and I wanted to leave time for discussion. This is the Brock Dead House. This house no longer looks like this. This is one picture. This is another picture of it. At the time, as you can see, it was a single story chimney, dirt road that was Queenston Street that later became a track for the railway. One of the people that was involved in this was a man named Guy Saint-Denis, if you're speaking French, or Guy Saint-Denis, if you're speaking with an English accent. He was from the University of Western Ontario. He was a historian. He spent a lot of time looking at the site and trying to figure out where they brought General Brock's body after he had been killed at the Redan Battery. He identified the property around 2008. The basement, the underneath part, was still there. The house was rebuilt in the 1920s. And until fairly recently, there was a well alongside of the house. They found artifacts in this one too. The house was the home of Patrick McCabe, and he was the one that safeguarded the body. Now, many of the older places in the village of Queenston claim that the body was taken here, but I think from reading the report that Mr. Saint-Denis wrote, I think that this was indeed the house where the body was brought. I wanted to show this. Queenston, one of the ways you can tour Queenston if you're doing it by yourself is to just go from historic plaque to historic plaque. They are throughout the village. You'll find them all over the place. Now, all sorts of groups put them up. The federal government has put some up, the provincial government. This one was put up by one of the people, by the Queenston Residents Association in the village. It's there. Sometimes it's a little hard to see because there's some beautiful, beautiful hydrangeas around it in the summer, so you have to dig in to find it. It's very interesting. It's a part of our history. Okay, other places that count in Queenston. We have 3 churches. 2 of them no longer are on their original sites. There is actually a 4th church here in Queenston that was not a church here, it was moved here. So we have 3 moving churches in Queenston. It's now the rectory, or it's part of the St. Saviour's plot of land, and it's where where you take part in the cooking and the meals and so on. Okay, so here are our 3 churches. Beautiful postcard. I think this one was one that I found in the Niagara-on-the-Lake Museum. First one is the Little White Church. This was originally built in 1862 and dedicated on January 25th, 1863. It started at the corner of Queen Street, or now Queenston Street, and Dumfries. It was a Wesleyan Methodist church, and it was built for a cost that should not exceed $700. Now, keeping in mind that Willow Bank was insured for £500, $700 is next to nothing. In fact, the congregation collected $515.38, according to Jean Huggins, who is a village historian. It was moved to the to across the road from the where the fire hall is now. There's just a big parking lot where it used to be. That move took place in 1960. In 2011, it was moved again, and this time it's behind the Laura C. Courthouse. And it is used occasionally for weddings, but it's also used for gatherings, for talks, book talks. Niagara Parks Commission owns it and administers it. And for the past couple of months, they've been doing Black History Month talks here at the chapel. It was, when it moved in 1960, it had moved from a Wesleyan church to become the United Church. But the United Church now is part of the St. David's United Church, so St. David's Queenston. Okay, our next church is the Baptist Church. This too moved. It just moved a couple of lots down the street. It moved from Partition to, is it Partition? No, it moved from Dumfries to Highlander. No, sorry, it is Partition. Sorry, I live in this village. Why should I know what the names of the streets are and where they are? Okay, this was a building project. It was built between 1841 and 1845 by two Queenston residents named Reuben Winchell and Solomon Vrooman. Vrooman was one of the names of the area. It's 19th century Gothic revival style. The walls are 2 feet thick, and they're built from the Queenston Quarry limestone, and it was transported down to Queenston by members of the Vrooman family. Now, the population or the congregation declined between 1863 and 1900. It never had more than 22 members, and yet it's a really substantial building. The doors of the church closed in 1916, and today it's the Queenston Community Center. You can see that the steeple is gone. It's open to people who want to use the library on Tuesday afternoons. Here's one of our historic plaques right on the building. And it can be rented. It's the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake rents this place out. One of the things I have been asked by people who are involved in Black history is, was this a church that was, when it was a church, that there was a Black congregation? I don't think so. I think the majority of Blacks lived closer to Niagara-on-the-Lake at the time, and this would have been a long way to come on a Sunday for a service. The other thing is that it was built by Vrooman, and the Vroomans were associated with the Chloe Cooley story. They were involved in that. They allowed her to be sent back to the United States. So I don't think that it was involved in Black history. I think it was strictly not strictly, but it was usually white congregants and a very small congregation at that. The last church, St. Saviour's. What can I say about St. Saviour's? It's the Brock Memorial Church. It's the only functioning church that's left in Queenston, and it too has a very small congregation. The original Anglican church was built after 1812. I've also been asked if Laura Secord worshipped here. I don't think she did. It came after 1812, and after her husband died, she moved up to Chippewa on the other side of Niagara Falls. So I don't think she worshipped at this church. The original church that was on the site burnt down. The present building, according to the plaque on the property, says it was built in 1879. However, Harold Usher, who was involved in the 1988 walk and was involved in the church, believed it was in fact built in 1873. It may have been dedicated in 1879, but he was, when you listen to him talking, he's very sure that it was 1873 that this church was built. Lots of legends about this church. One is that it was designed by it's based on a Christopher Wren design. Nobody's been able to substantiate that, but it does look like an English church. Another is that it's the only church in the Anglican group that is named after a layperson. That again is not true. In fact, there's one up in Exeter in Ontario that was named after a layperson. That one, though, was named after the person that paid to have the church built, rather than having it named after a hero from a war. It does have stained glass windows that have no religious symbols in them. They are dedicated to the military and to the War of 1812. In 2012, the bailiff of Guernsey and the constable of St. Peter Port visited Queenston as a part of the 1812 celebration or commemoration of the War of 1812. St. Peter Port was where General Brock was born. And in fact, the Guernsey Museum owns the portrait, the only portrait of General Brock that was done during his lifetime. Riverbrink was able to borrow it during the 1812 commemoration, but it's now back in St. Peter Port. The church next door, St. Martin's in Niagara Falls, is the parish hall, as I mentioned. It was a moved one. It was moved to Queenston after it was deconsecrated in 1952. The official opening of that parish hall was 1953. So, sorry, I'm confusing here. It was deconsecrated in 1952. It was officially opened as the parish hall in 1953. So you will be tested on this. I won't be. Okay, so that's the buildings in Queenston. You can see here you've got the Brock Dead House. You've got the old printery over here. You've got a barn of some sort here, and you've got Queenston Heights in the background. Anyway, there's a lot more to Queenston. I love to do walking tours and taking people through. We've got monuments, we've got all sorts of things that I like to show. I just wanted to show you a few of our treasures. So,
thank you very much, Linda. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type them. I had a couple myself. Where is the little stone cottage located? You showed that one, but I didn't catch where that was.
Okay, it's on the corner of Front Street, and there's a street that's a block that has nothing on it called Maple Street. We have a new park here in Queenston. It was opened in 2017. And if you walk through the park and keep on walking, you'll run smack into the little stone cottage.
Okay.
Toward the river. I think it's actually owned or is part of the Trigano family's home. They have a house there now too. So anyway, it's a beautiful little spot. It's very interesting. When you stop and look at it, you find out all sorts of things. Pictures are good. I like showing pictures, but seeing it in real life makes a difference too.
Pat Hartman wanted you just to repeat the name, the date when the name changed from Queenstown to Queenston.
Okay, I've got my notes, hang on. According to a letter, it was dated November the 26th, 1792.
Okay, so when Simcoe was around.
Yes. Queenstown is a name that, from what I've been able to find, there's the Queenstown where you can go skiing or bungee jumping in New Zealand. I've done neither, but I've been to Queenstown in New Zealand. There's nothing that would make me jump off a bridge. Queenstown was also the name of the place in Ireland that the Lusitania was launched from, but it's changed names now. It's got a different name. Okay. And there was a Queenstown in the 1950s in South Africa. I don't know what the name of that one is now, but Jean Huggins had a letter or a postcard that I've seen a picture of from that town. She was corresponding with someone there when Jean Huggins was our local historian for many years, and she was a reporter for a number of the papers. So she was doing a lot of research.
Wonderful. Babs Worthy wanted to know how many cemeteries there are in Queenston.
Good old Babs. Okay. There are no cemeteries in Queenston. However, there are 3 burial grounds. Cemeteries are usually associated with churches. none of the churches here have had burial grounds. We're on shale. To be able to put a large burial ground in, it would sink into the river if you were at the churches. So where are people buried? Sam Weir is buried at the front door at Riverbrink. You walk past it when you go in. Willowbank has its own cemetery, its own graveyard. To get to it, you have to walk along the parkway because there's a big gully between it and the house. So if you want a safe walk, you have to walk to it. They are still, descendants of the Hamilton family are still being buried there. They're cremated remains now, and but they're still using it. When I walk there in the springtime, you see graves that have been put in the 2000s. And of course, the final place, the one is we can't be sure of because we don't know where Queenston ends on the south side, is Queenston Heights, where General Brock is buried.
So not very many people get the honor of being buried in Queenston.
That's correct. That's correct. But keep in mind here that this is another great story that ladies live here until well over 100. We've got a number of women that have died at 101, 105, and this has been going on for some time. So it's a healthy place for ladies to live.
That's great. Augusta McGowan was asking how you access the cemetery behind Willowbank and when your next walking tour is, if you
I do walking tours on request. So if Amy wants to arrange one for us, I'm more than happy to do that. How to get there? It's hard to describe. You have to, okay, if you know the parkway, the graveyard is on the same side as Willowbank, so it's on the east side of the parkway. You have to go over the little bridge that's on the gully, and that's the hardest part to walk over. You have to make sure there's no traffic coming because it's on a bend in the road. Why would anybody think that people would want to walk? Once you get past that, there's an open field. You look and you see a gate with a field behind it. You go through the field and then you're at the gravesite. Right. So if I'm happy to show people where it's not the easiest place to find. I've taken the Willowbank students to the gravesite because they were walking through the village determined to find it by themselves. It can be done, but it might take days.
Well, maybe I'll put out a request to see if there's enough interest from a group and we can get a group together to come do a walking tour.
Absolutely.
Jackie Bonnick wanted to know what the story is on the beautiful large Indian limestone house on Niagara River and the cul-de-sac street.
The Niagara River. So, okay, that's called Greystones. That's the house that was built by John Bright. Now I've been in the gardens. I've never been in the house, but the legend is that there's a Wedgwood kitchen in there, or a Wedgwood dining room, where the walls and so on were designed with the Wedgwood jasperware, and just beautiful, I understand. It has changed hands many times since Brights have left. I understand it just recently changed hands again. One of the cool things about it, though, is it has its own dock, and it's got a small funicular that goes up to the dock from the river. So when you're walking down the back behind, when you're going past, when you're doing your walks and just walking on the countryside where the old train tracks used to be, you can walk past and see this thing where the family would be able to get down to the dock and get to their boat. One of the owners actually did live in Toronto and often boated here from Toronto, and that's what they did.
And then she also wanted to know when the memorial to Brock was built.
The one that's there now?
I'm assuming, yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's the second one. That the Fenians blew up the original one around in the 1830s when they were having a fine time, trying to do whatever they wanted to do, crossing the river, who knows, having a great time. Anyway, the second one was built, I think around the 1856, I think it was built. And I remember reading about it. It actually went to Parliament of Canada to build this the monument, because it was a different kind of monument. It wasn't what was originally planned, which was something like an Egyptian pillar. What do they call them? anyway, but they wanted to do this kind of thing with the large, high thing that can be seen forever. It's a pillar that can be seen forever, and you can go up it in the summer. I think there's 170 steps. I haven't done that since I was about 10 years old. The views, I understand, are tremendous, but it dominates. When people come and visit us, they say, well, where is Brock's Monument? I can take them out to the backyard and point. So yeah, it's been there, I think, since the 1850s.
Heather Arnott said obelisk. Was that the word you were looking for? Obelisk.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm not Egyptian.
Ange Petrie wanted to know where the most photographed house that you showed, where is that one located? And is there any more behind that one? Any more story behind that one?
Front Street. It's on Front Street. The family lived there for many, many years. They were a wealthy family. They owned the whole block that the house is on now. They don't own it anymore. There's a barn that's kind of cool. It's at one stage I heard that the original, among the things these people did, they were butchers. They were all sorts of merchants. The butcher's dray was apparently kept in the shed, but I've been in the shed and it's not there now. So it's a cool barn. They've got it. It's just a lovely area. It takes the whole block. The unfortunate thing is that it's very low, and I've been there after rains, and you can see puddles, and you wonder about the drainage. So, but yeah, it's a pretty house. It's lovely. The family owned land the other side of the road too. More history of Queenston. By St. Saviour's Church, you've got St. Saviour's Church, you've got the parish hall, and then you've got an area of land. That land was also owned by the family that owned this, the photographed house. I think they still do own it. That there used to be a right-of-way. In fact, there still is a right-of-way that would go across it's along the river and down to the dock. It hasn't been used since, well, they've got full like trees there now. So although it's still officially a right-of-way that the town owns, it hasn't been used as a right-of-way forever. So there's a block there. There's one of the let me think. I've got too much going on in my head. There's a stone that Ted Rumble has been pushing to make sure that we get them looked after and kept. There's one of those here in Queenston. It's a marker. It's a boundary marker for the old military reserves.
Yeah, the ordnance boundary.
Yeah, the ordnance. Yeah, so we've got one here in Queenston. We may have 2 or 3. We haven't found them yet.
Nice. Peter just commented that it's his understanding that Brock's monument is higher than Lord Nelson's monument in Trafalgar Square.
It could well be. I mean, it could well be. Of course, the advantage for Brock is that you can stand way back and it doesn't matter. You've got the hill, and Trafalgar Square doesn't.
A couple people asked about if you know the story of the house with all the Range Rovers.
Oh, okay. That place is owned by a guy named Paul Safari. He's an Englishman, or started out as an Englishman. He is well known throughout the world for his Range Rovers. He tells me that he gets calls at 6 in the morning from people in all over the world asking him to repair these things. He knows how to repair them. There are not many people left who know how to do it properly. Paul is one of the few. In fact, I've been walking down the street and somebody has stopped me and said, can I help them find out about it? Because he had driven in his Range Rover from Hamilton and wanted Paul to repair it. Well, Paul did, but he didn't do it then. So there's place, people look at it and say, oh, it's all junk, but it's not. Paul will tell me that that one of the things there, because he's so busy, he hasn't had time to do his own work, but he's got one of the original Range Rovers from way back that he wants to build up to make it modern. But anyway, He is also the person in our village who knows everyone and everything. So if you need to know something, or if you're going away and you want to make sure that people don't know that you're out of town, he puts his garbage out in front of your place so that it looks like, you know, he's one of these great guys.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Great. Alan Smith wanted to know where the Hamilton warehouse is located.
Okay, that was the warehouse was that I was talking about was in fact the Lowry Merritt House barn. Okay, there probably were other warehouses. One of the things you have to remember about Queenston is that down by the docks, we now have vacant land or land that you can walk along. At one stage, part of that was a railway track. There were also housing down there until the I think the 1950s, when they had a major crisis when the ice was flowing through the river and it just took down so many of the houses that they just banned building houses down there. My guess was that at the time there was probably more warehouses down there because this was an important place. This was the place where this was as far up the river as you could get before you ran into the rapids. So it was the portage place. This is where the portage road started. So there had to be warehouses there for people bringing in goods and then portaging them up past Niagara Falls to Chippewa. So the bottom line is I don't know where the warehouse was. I just know about the Lowry Merritt House.
And then just Carol Clark shared a link in the chat if people are interested of some details and pictures of the Greystone house, including the Wedgwood dining room. There's interior shots and exterior shots and stuff there. So that's there for people to check out. And Mika wanted to know, sorry, I just got to move down here, if Queenston was older than Old Town.
I would suggest they're probably about the same period. Queenston, the dates that usually are associated with Queenston are the 1780s to 1790s. So that was when the Hamiltons first arrived here, the Secord family arrived here, escaping after the Revolution. So I'm not that sure about when Old Town started. I suspected it was about the same period. Queenston just never grew. It was just always stayed around 400 people.
And Jackie Bonnick wanted to know who built the large white house on a large property opposite the Laura Secord School.
Large white house opposite the Laura Secord School. Okay, I'm just trying to think. One opposite one is Greystones. There's a white clapboard house at the corner of Queenston Street, and I can't remember the name of that little street. It was called the Doctor's House. There are around the Laura Secord School. There's one called the Doctor's House. There's one called the Teacherage, and there's one called the it was owned by St. Saviour's Church, but it was never used as a rectory. It was rented out. So those three houses, they're all clapboard. They're all around Laura Secord School, but a large white house.
She says it's the Doctor's House.
It's the Doctor's House. Okay, beautiful garden, absolutely stunning garden. Yeah.
And then just one last comment from Elizabeth Oliver Malone. The Hamilton Cemetery is private and looked after by trustees, Hamilton trustees.
Yes, but they have never stopped people from walking in. Yeah.
Wonderful. So I think that's it for questions. Thanks so much for answering all those. We had quite a few there, but definitely lots of interest on the properties in Queenston. And we thank you again for joining us today, Linda. And I'm sure if people have other questions, if you want to send them through to me, I can forward them on to Linda. And we'll look into maybe doing a walk, maybe either in the spring or maybe the fall would be nice as well. We'll see what we can put together.
Yeah, no problem.
So
Okay,
thanks everyone
Thank you
for
everyone
joining
for
us
coming.
today. Thanks, Linda, and thank you everyone for joining us. This is the end of our virtual lectures for this year, but we'll be doing some in-person lectures monthly starting in April to September. So watch for those, and you can check out our website, notlmuseum.ca, for any other upcoming events and programs. Have a great day, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.